This is the way losers acting around misfits. Pound for pound, I'm the listing. You can bounce and get dismissed. Clown, get this. Couldn't walk a mile wearing my Fitbit. Competition is non-existent.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. In this episode, we will be talking about Florida Championship Wrestling, which was owned and operated by Steve Kern between the years of 2007 and 2012. It served as a WWE developmental system. So this was coming after the disaster that was Deep South Wrestling and the closure of OVW. The WWE needed a new developmental system. Florida Championship Wrestling became that place. So before we get into Florida Championship Wrestling, we have to talk about the owner, Steve Kern. An interesting tidbit to Steve Kern's life is that his father was actually a POW in Vietnam. Between 1965 and 1973, Richard Kern was trapped in Vietnam. While his father was trapped in Vietnam in 1972, Steve Kern became friends with Mike Graham. Mike Graham is the son of Eddie Graham, the promoter of Florida Championship Wrestling. And in 1972, he actually debuted. The next year, his father would be freed from Vietnam. In 1976, this story of his father being trapped in Vietnam would be used by heel Bob Roop, who called Richard Kern a coward and forced Steve to fight him in a match. Steve won the match and became one of the most over babyfaces in Florida. After a few years, he moved on to Memphis, where he became one of the fabulous ones with Stan Lane. This tag team was managed by Jim Cornette at one point. This lasted for about 7 to 9 years. And the story goes that at some point in the early 90s, Steve Kern was 40 years old and unemployed when he ran into Hulk Hogan, who was also a native of Florida. Hulk Hogan asked him why he wasn't working, and Steve Kern said, well, just don't have anything to do. Then Steve Kern told Hulk Hogan the story about killing 12 alligators. So Hogan puts in a good word to him to Vince. Steve Kern is brought to the WWF, and the birth of Skinner in August of 1991, which was a drastic departure from the Fabulous Ones, which was pretty much a pretty boy gimmick. Now he was a savage alligator hunter from the Florida Everglades. Despite how he looked, Skinner was actually Steve Kern's favorite character, and he was very proud of the work that he had done with that character. Skinner wouldn't last very long, however, and in later years, Steve Kern will become a road agent for the WWF, later the WWE. He was still under contract with the company in 2007 when Deep South Wrestling went under and all of the talent was sent to Florida. Florida Championship Wrestling boasted probably one of the best array of trainers the WWF has ever put together, which include Jerry Briscoe, Ricky Steamboat, Billy Kidman, Norman Smiley, Joey Mercury, Dusty Rhodes, Steve Kern, and Dr. Tom Pritchard, but also Bill DeMott. The array of talent that came through Florida Championship Wrestling is tremendous. You have Bray Wyatt, Big E, Trent Beretta, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Naomi, the Bella Twins, Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, Jinder Mahal, Wade Barrett, Heath Slater, Natalya Neidhart, David Hart Smith, Ted DiBiase Jr., Kurt Axel, Cody Rhodes, Shawn Spears. Just so many people went through FCW. And asked about what his philosophy was for training students, Steve Kern says he focused on respect, locker room etiquette, peer-to-peer respect. But then, not being starstruck, act like a professional, act like you deserve to be there. Secondary to that would be ring psychology. Understand why things happen, and yet movement is supposed to entertain. That's the purpose of moves. And he said that charisma is also very important. And that's what he wanted to focus on: psychology, locker room etiquette, and charisma. In 2012, there was a shakeup in the WWE, and Dr. Tom Pritchard was released as the head trainer of Florida Championship Wrestling. Because Dr. Tom Pritchard had been with WWE developmental since the very beginning, since back in the Funkin' Dojo, I think it's about appropriate to do a little bit of a biography on Dr. Tom Pritchard. So Dr. Tom Pritchard is the older brother of Bruce Prichard, the creative director of the WWE currently. In 1974, he was working for Paul Bosch in Houston. He was 15 years old working in the office. In October of 1979, Tom Pritchard transferred to in-ring competitor, and he wrestled all around the world, all around the country rather, in Portland, Continental in Dallas, and Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is where he credited learning the most of his technique and his style, because it was a very diverse area with that very diverse fans. It was a heavy lucha libre, and he was already a fan of this era. You know, the Mike LaBelle Olympic Auditorium, which he claims is the Madison Square Garden of the West. He ended up going to Japan in 1981. When the WWF started invading Southern California in 1982, Dr. Tom disappeared and went overseas. In the mid-'80s, he became a member of the Heavenly Bodies with Pat Rose. This was the original Heavenly Bodies. The Heavenly Bodies name would be resurrected in the early 90s with Dr. Tom Pritchard and Stan Lane. When Stan Lane left the group, the Heavenly Bodies became Dr. Tom Pritchard and Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey. This is from the days of Smoky Mountain and the WWF. In 1995, Dr. Tom Pritchard would be repackaged by the WWF as Zip from the Body Donnas, a tag team partner to Skip, who was Chris Candido, and Sonny, who was Tammy Lynn Sitch. So Dr. Tom Pritchard was involved with the WWF off and on for several years, again, being involved with the developmental system since the days of the Funkin' Dojo in 1998, 1999, until 2012. He at least was a guest trainer in pretty much every facility that the WWF had, and his specialty was the wrestling skills. He learned the wrestling drills, but most importantly, his favorite was to actually get in the ring with the talent and actually push them and teach them. He tells a story one time of wrestling Heath Slater for an hour Broadway, in which he broke his ankle an hour in on a backdrop. But it says that he finished the match, and it said it's not about the hour. It's about the breathing. It's about the pace. It's about the tempo. It's about not resting. It's about learning to breathe. Shortly before he was released, Dr. Tom Pritchard was asked by John Laurinaitis and Canyon Ceman to write a curriculum, a book detailing how to train professional wrestlers from beginning to end. He said he didn't see it as being very useful, but his bosses had asked him to do it, therefore he sat down to write the book. Before the book was completed, and before he was able to turn it in, he was released. So the book now exists on Amazon, so if you want to learn how to train professional wrestlers, there is a book that exists that was written by Dr. Tom Pritchard. Shortly after Tom Pritchard was released from his contract, it was announced that WWE was going to move its tapings from Tampa to Orlando. This put Steve Kern in a very difficult situation because he did not want to relocate. So Steve Kern essentially had to cede control of Florida Championship Wrestling to Triple H, who is now taking over as head of talent relations from John Laurinaitis. And with everything being moved to Orlando, Steve Kern lost a lot of control over Florida Championship Wrestling, and then it was also renamed NXT. So this, of course, coincides with the building of the Performance Center. But around the time of 2012, 2013, a lot of the complaints about Bill DeMott started to surface, and emails and memos that talent had written over the last several months started to become public. So let's talk about some of those. The horror stories about Bill DeMott became really public in 2015, where they really couldn't keep a lid on it anymore. So a lot of the horror stories about Bill DeMott were actually from the FCW days, probably during the last few days or the early days of 2013, which would be near the Performance Center eras. So first, it was Austin Mattelson, who works in AEW as Luchasaurus. He sent an email to Canyon Ceman, Dorothy Brill, and Jane Geddes of WWE. This was dated March 11th, 2013. So it reads, I am composing this memo today because I have had a number of serious concerns about the actions and words of head coach Bill DeMott during my employment as talent for WWE Developmental. Many of these actions I have tried to ignore or hope that they would cease, but because they have now put me in a dangerous situation, not only for my career, but for my personal health and safety, I feel the need to speak out to someone of a higher authority. In this memo, I will provide details on a series of incidents which underlie my concerns. I would like to request that this remain in strict confidence, as I am afraid that if Coach DeMott were to know I spoke out, he would find ways to punish me for it. In fact, the entire process of writing a letter to Human Resources has been called a faggot's way of dealing with problems by Coach DeMott. Physical injury due to imprudent coaching. It reads, The action that has led me to finally speak out happened on Thursday, February 28th, following our house show. I had been taken awkward hit to my knee in a match and was being examined by Brian Duncan. This hit aggravated a previous injury, one that should never have happened, that I had sustained during a practice drill orchestrated by Coach DeMott after practice had already been completed. An MRI revealed a partial tear of my PCL and a strain on a ligament in the back of my knee. I have been told that I can work through it, but it may aggravate here and there. This injury can be enduring, as many of the superstars on the main roster wrestle their whole careers with it. I should never have had any issue with my knee, but on that particular practice day, after a 3-hour morning session had ended at 11 a.m., DeMott put 280-pound Gary Jackson back in the ring at 11:30 and forced 8 of us to give him 10 takedowns each. After Gary had bumped 60 times in a matter of minutes, I entered the ring and was asked to give him 10 fireman takedowns. On the first one, he collapsed from exhaustion while on my back, driving my knees into the mat where I sustained this injury. The hit I took aggravated it, and Coach DeMott pulled trainer Brian Duncan and I into the training room and said, without any knowledge of my actual injury, this injury can't keep flaring up. It doesn't look good, perception-wise, to us or the office or for your career going forward. This injury was treated after the match, and I was cleared by Brian Duncan at the time. Based on Coach DeMott's statement, I feel that I am in a position where I have to cover up any injuries I may have, otherwise I will be punished or fired. The following week, I was in severe discomfort, but fearing repercussions, I attempted to work through it. Coach DeMott has not only instilled this fear in me, but I have spoken to several other members of the roster who have been made to feel by Coach DeMott that their current injuries are signs of weakness as men and could potentially lead Coach DeMott to advocate for their firing. On 2 separate occasions, Coach DeMott forced me to perform dangerous moves without properly warming up. One incident followed my evaluation where Canyon Seaman asked me to start working on parkour and gymnastics moves. It was 7:30 a.m. before practice, and he saw me standing in the ring with Enzo Amore and said, quote, "Do a takedown, let go of him, and do a backflip, then come back to him." The idea made no sense. I was not properly warmed up, and I nearly landed on my head on one attempt. The second incident was before a live event. He wanted Oliver Gray to test out his finisher on someone, so he grabbed me and forced me to take a high bump on my neck without warming up. I had missed a week of practice because of a neck strain prior to this, and Coach DeMott was well aware of that. I have also watched and participated in drills that were hazardous to our safety. He has made us do squats on the top rope, including some students who had never been up that high in their careers. He made the beginners group perform monkey flips without a crash pad, and the first 6 who participated landed on their heads and necks and were lucky not to have been seriously injured. The aforementioned drill in which Gary Jackson injured my knee also saw Memo Montenegro injury his neck and shoulder. That's how he wrote it, sorry. He was on his 40th bump in 5 minutes and got dizzy before the 7th consecutive hip toss and landed on his head. Unprofessional work environment. The issue of my physical well-being is not my only concern. I am an educated individual who worked at Cal State Northridge with professors and students. I know one is supposed to conduct oneself in a professional sense. I also understand that this is a unique business and the lines on proper behavior may be a bit blurred. Yet, there is no question that Coach DeMott, on a daily basis, not only makes unprofessional choices in words and actions, choices that go against many of the policies of this company, but choices that have created a culture of fear and negativity in this system. Showing up each and every day for training is mentally agonizing because of the comments we are all forced to hear. He routinely makes fun of us, of anyone sitting out because of injury, and also makes rude comments about people's names and personal lives, and has established a hostile work environment through verbal assaults. To wit, he's going to give a list. DeMott constantly refers to Oliver Gray as Joel Pedophile, which personally enrages me because I used to help a psychology professor in Los Angeles do lectures for sexually abused children. Second point, when Dante Dash referred to his finishing move as the Davy Boy, as it was utilized by the late Davy Boy Smith, who died tragically, Coach DeMott makes the following comment. The Davy Boy? What, turning blue and dropping dead on the lawn? Point 3. Coach DeMott told student Enzo Amore that he hopes he dies. DeMott also told our entire morning class and Ricky Steamboat's class to kill themselves just days after we told the ring bell 10 times for the late Mike Graham, a former star of FCW wrestler who committed suicide. Point 5. Coach DeMott routinely bullies Enzo, as well as physically as well as verbally. I have seen Enzo on several occasions be slapped in the face by Bill. During one practice, he decided to show Enzo how doing a slam wrong could hurt someone. So he picked up Enzo and dropped him without warning directly on his head and neck. He then decided that each time a student slammed his 100-pound heavy bag with bad form, that student had to slam one of his peers the same way. DeMott found this drill amusing, yet each student was put at serious injury and risk. Point 6. DeMott has grabbed and injured David Harwood by pulling him to the office door and verbally chastising him for standing by the ring during practice when he wasn't cleared, even though he was simply listening to a lecture by Ricky Steamboat. DeMott has kicked Memo Montenegro in the groin and laughed as he crumbled in a heap. Memo, being a Mexican immigrant to the United States, has a heavy accent, which Coach DeMott constantly criticizes and makes fun of. He routinely will attempt to bust students' lip on the bottom rope when they stand close to the ring. On several occasions, he has punished students for mistakes in practice by making them bend forward, putting their face near the ropes so that Coach DeMott can bounce off the rope, off the bridge of their nose. He routinely calls Gary Jackson a fat tub of goo, tells Osmond Cherry, who is of African descent, to go back to Africa, and most recently has made derogatory remarks about the sexual preferences to Brandon Traven. Coach DeMott insinuated that Traven is gay and used the derogatory half a sissy to make fun of him simply because he sat out of practice and has had several injuries in the last couple of months. This is not the first time he targeted Brandon either. In December, I witnessed Coach DeMott question Traven about a head injury in the trainer's room. After Traven explained that a blow to the head in practice made him dizzy, DeMott slapped him in the head and left the room. I witnessed a similar incident a couple of months ago when Alexander Rusev was recovering from a neck surgery. Coach DeMott saw Rusev wearing a New York Jets shirt at practice and, not liking the sports team, proceeded to physically grab Rusev by the collar and rip the shirt off of him. Rusev was not cleared for any contact at that point and clearly showed physical pain after the incident. Following this incident, a group of students were discussing how this sort of thing happened before with an injured Briley Pierce. Briley had a broken leg and Coach DeMott kicked him in the medical boot. This happened before I was under contract and nonetheless fits a pattern of negligent and abusive behavior that I have observed with Coach DeMott and is worth investigating further. According to Oliver Gray, he was once told that if he sat out of practice to rest a very bad low back injury, that Coach DeMott would pull him from NXT tapings and from attending the Royal Rumble, even though the trainer had requested that Oliver just sit out one practice. And then that was the end of all the bullet points. He says, I have been in this system under Coach DeMott for 8 months now, and recently told that I am not improving at a rate that is acceptable. I have made concerted efforts in the past to practice more often and work on the parkour moves requested by Canyon Seaman. However, Bill has routinely kicked me out of the building after practice, including a day when WWE superstar Alex Riley asked me to work on some parkour moves with him. This, along with constant interrupting of practices just to put people down and make negative comments, has all but killed any motivation I have to spend any extra time around him. It should be stated that I am not a vindictive person. I am open-minded. I do not have a problem with one-off color jokes, difficult practice drills. I was signed to this company after Steve Regal told me he saw a tremendous improvement in my ring work between tryouts. I was told Mr. Regal that I could only imagine how good I could be working 24/7 for this company. I have always been intrinsically motivated and will continue something until I perfect it. Yet I personally feel that Coach DeMott creates an environment that hinders my opportunities to improve. Coach DeMott restricts our practices instead of opting for dangerous and unproductive drills, while constantly verbally assaulting our appearances, personalities, sexual preferences, injuries, and character. It seems impossible for me to maximize my time in the ring. In fact, even as recently as training on March the 4th, guest trainer Lance Storm went out his way to demonstrate moves to me that Coach DeMott kicked me out of the building for not doing correctly. When I asked him how to do them, Coach DeMott said, quote, that shit, Judas, get out of the building. Ugh. Is this the type of work environment that WWE desires? When can we set up a time to discuss this matter? In closing, I would be remiss if I did not clarify to you that this is solely a problem with Bill DeMott and not a problem with the coaching staff that has been assembled around him. For example, Ricky Steamboat has been a terrific help to me and always provides me with positive reinforcement and quality examples to learn from. Terry Taylor has gone out of his way to pull me aside and give me helpful advice. Billy Gunn has been an amazingly refreshing force, bringing knowledge and enthusiasm that has been extremely beneficial to this system. The changes that have recently occurred in the WWE have been excellent, and I am excited for the future plans of WWE Developmental. It is because of these positive attributes that I am expressing my concerns to you. I want to be a part of a solution to the problems that I have listed, one that will lead to a future success for the developmental system. All right, so that's Luchasaurus's account of what took place. So about 2 weeks after the Austin Mattelson email, Ryan Collins, who wrestled in, I think it was Florida Championship Wrestling or early NXT, as Brandon Draven, sent another memo to Canyon Seaman. So this is dated from March 25th, 2013. It says, Mr. Canyon Seaman, I am writing this letter due to concerns I've had with training. I've completed writing this for some time now after seeing Harley race this past week and talking with him about my concerns for not only my training but my physical well-being. He himself encouraged me to write a letter, and not only that, he informed me to have anyone in the office to call him if they have any questions about any of the information I will be writing about. My overall concern is about my safety. Before we took off for our holiday break, I suffered a minor head injury. The thing about the head injuries is you can't really tell how bad they are until you have a proper time to rest. During the course of a practice, I got hit in the head during a drill. I felt very dizzy right away and stepped out of the ring. Practice was almost over that day, and I told a few guys near me that I was dizzy. One suggested I might have been dehydrated or in need of some food. I drank some water and ate a protein bar, and I did feel better as the day went. I decided to play the next day of training by ear and see how I felt. I stretched out and did a few rolls in the ring. After just a couple of rolls, I felt dizzy again and saw the trainer. That day, our trainer, Brian Duncan, was on the road, and a substitute trainer attended to me. As I was sitting on the table, she examined my eyes and reaction time. Eventually, Coach DeMott came in asking what happened. I told him the story of how everything occurred. He then accused me of making things worse, which is not uncommon as Coach DeMott gets angry and standoffish at any sign of injury. The main part of this story that angers me is that he was leaving the trainer's room. Coach DeMott slapped me on the top of the head. This really angered me, as I don't believe he has a right to put his hands on anyone, especially like that. I was lucky that my head injury wasn't too serious. His negligence in this situation could have worsened my injury. I have also grown very tired of how Coach DeMott has constantly bullied us, whether by physically hitting us or by calling us gay. He has on numerous occasions alluded to me as being gay. His favorite phrase is half a sissy, not to mention calling me and others faggots. Coach DeMott has also on several occasions grabbed the bottom rope while we are watching practice and pull it back and hit us in the face. I personally don't understand his destructive and bullying nature. While talking with Harley this week about countless unproductive and straight up dangerous drills, he encouraged me to write this letter. Told me to include that all parties who read it should call him to talk further. Harley agreed that we should not be subjected to physical or verbal abuse. He also was very angry about hearing about the situation I shared, and more than anything, didn't understand why he has us doing unproductive drills to begin with, as opposed to having practice matches, which we have only done on a few occasions. In fact, upon Harley hearing the story of Coach DeMott hitting me on the head after the injury, Harley was very angry by this. In 5 years of training with Harley, I never felt unsafe or in danger or suffering a career-threatening injury much like I have here. I have also witnessed Coach DeMott try to rip a t-shirt off Alexander Rusev shortly after he had a neck surgery. He, on numerous occasions, called Oliver Gray Joe Pettifer, a pedophile, smacked Enzo Amore, who is Eric Ernst, in the mouth. He has also told Enzo to kill himself on at least one occasion that I heard with my own ears. Morale amongst us is constantly low and is getting worse. However, on the flip side, Steve Kern, Ricky Steamboat, Terry Taylor, and Billy Gunn have all been positive influences since joining this company. The reason I haven't said anything until now is fear of either losing my job or how Coach DeMott would treat me going forward. as he has already treated me and others very badly. I decided to go ahead and write, as I feel now nothing will change if I don't speak up, and I hope I can count on your discretion in this matter. Thank you, Ryan Collins. So this is the second one. The second. Another developmental wrestler by the name of Derek Four, who wrestled in WWE NXT between 2012 and 2013. He wrestled under the name Chad Baxter. Did a shoot interview on the Shoot Radio show, and he talked about Bill DeMott there. And he says, if you messed up a spot, he would break a yardstick over your back. He would also claim that John Cena's personal trainer, Rob McIntyre, of Hard Knocks South Gym, was blamed for all of the injuries in NXT, but in actuality, it was Bill DeMott who injured the wrestlers with his high intense level of training, and says that he believes that Bill DeMott was only there to market his book and talked a lot about the drugs he did in the past, and that he does not belong in NXT at all. There were other allegations against Bill DeMott as well. Trent Beretta and Ryan Nemeth both accused Bill DeMott of covering for a sexual harasser. This is from Raja.com. It's dated June 2013. It says, rumors have been circulating on Twitter that a trainer for WWE Developmental Divas is facing sexual harassment allegations. When former WWE star Trent Beretta was asked about a few weeks ago about NXT diva Bayley and how she is similar to him, Beretta responded, nope, she's way prettier. I don't even get sexually harassed by my strength coach. Recently released Briley Pierce, brother of WWE superstar Dolph Ziggler, again, Ryan Nemeth, sent out some rather questionable tweets that were later deleted regarding the claims. Some of the tweets included, nothing humorous, Hugh Morris, which was Bill DeMott's name in WCW, about enabling protecting a sexual predator or threatening the jobs of women who complain about him. At post-show meeting, will someone say, hey bosses, after you're done patting yourselves on the back, our strength coach is a huge pervert. Well, I guess it's too vague for WWE. It is true that the longer a guy gets away with sexually harassing and victimizing women at work, the better he is at designing workouts. So this is one of many different types of situations that involved Bill DeMott. Another little piece of business that took place around the FCW era was a wrestler named by the name of Brian Jack, who wrestled in FCW as Buck Wild. He claimed to have a WWE developmental contract, and he decided to file a lawsuit against Santino Marella, Beth Phoenix, Dr. James Andrews, and Shed Media. So, Shed Media, for those of you who don't know, was the production company behind Tough Enough. So, his allegations, which were filed in a Wisconsin court on November 30th, 2012, was that, one, he informed WWE of hazing, threats, sexual harassment, and he was told by WWE to talk to Steve Kern about that. That he claims Kern broke his neck, pelvis, backbone, thumb, and severely damaged his right leg. That Santino tried to get him to commit homeowners fraud by faking a car accident to protect WWE. That Dr. James Andrews suspected him of wearing a wire, gave him an MRI, and tried to get him on workman's compensation. That WWE claimed that they would pay for his medical costs, but he is still having to pay for them himself. He then also claimed that Shed Media was used by WWE for fraud, leading him to believe that he would be on Tough Enough. This would mean that he would get a contract that would absolve WWE from any liabilities. He claimed he didn't want this in his contract and that they were going to replace it, but he never got a new contract. He also claims that a company called Quick Trip was contracted by WWE to slander him and that their slander had affected his life. PW Insider, among other wrestling media sites, was able to prove that he was not under a WWE developmental contract. And once that took place, a lot of the other things that he had said began to fall apart. And his case was ultimately dismissed. He ended up filing a new case against WWE, against Steve Kern and FCW, on January the 3rd, 2013. He filed another lawsuit against Steve Kern, Florida Championship Wrestling, claiming that he was forced to train in damaged rings on January the 7th, 2009, while there were functional rings available. He also claimed that the ring collapsed, injuring his knee, and that no meaningful aid was given, and that there was gross negligence on behalf of FCW, and he wanted his hospital costs paid for past, present, and future. The case was later dismissed because he would not serve the defendants in a timely manner. Also, he failed to prove that he actually had any type of standing within the jurisdiction. So there was a lot of things going on in FCW. In July of 2013, the Performance Center was christened. It is a 26,000 square foot facility in Orlando, Florida, that sports 7 training rings, a strength and conditioning program, and a 5,500 foot square gym, along with several other amenities. Earlier in 2013, WWE began their partnership with Full Sail University. The partnership with Full Sail University brought live tapings of NXT to Full Sail. It also created the Student Initiative Program, which gave students of Full Sail University the opportunity to shadow and intern at WWE for jobs such as marketing, production, graphic design. During this time, WWE provided over $4,000 in scholarships to students of Full Sail University. Throughout the years, not only did some of the early takeovers were filmed at Full Sail, but you also had Tough Enough in 2015 was filmed at Full Sail. And you also had ESPN's E60, WWE Behind the Curtain, which was also filmed at Full Sail University. So in 2021, the deal with Full Sail University was ended in August of 2021. The Performance Center was rechristened the Capital Wrestling Center and became the full-time home for NXT. But during the time of WWE and Full Sail University, it didn't stop there from being some controversies. First was Rob McIntyre, who used to be the strength and conditioning coach for John Cena. He was let go as he was blamed for an excessive number of injuries to talent in NXT. It turns out that a lot of the talent blamed those injuries on Bill DeMott's strenuous training systems. He was replaced by Matt Wilczynski, who ended up being the strength and conditioning coach that was sexually harassing talent that Ryan Nemeth and Trent Beretta was blasting in 2013. Even though he was released in 2016 and replaced with Sean Hayes, who I believe is still the strength and conditioning coach at NXT. So throughout the history of the WWE developmental system, we saw that they preferred to send talents to a territory that the talent would learn in that territory. They would travel and they would get experience, and then they would come on the road with WWE. And it seems like over the years, due to all of the problems that came with the territory system, that WWE decided to just centralize in Orlando, where they have the Performance Center, and they're actually going to tape NXT out of the Performance Center from now on. They're centralizing and eliminating the territory concept. It eliminates a lot of the older, saltier Jim Cornette, Jody Hamilton kind of guys, but it also gets rid of the trusty hands like Steve Kern and Dr. Tom Pritchard, and it replaces it with a sort of corporate system that is constantly overseen by Triple H and talent relations, and we'll see how it goes in the long term. So Florida Championship Wrestling was officially WWE's last developmental territory, and it was still pretty well beloved. Most people who watched the TV really enjoyed it. The talent that came out of there was phenomenal. You know, you had guys like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins who were superstars today. Roman Reigns main evented several WrestleManias, ended up being one of the biggest box office attractions that they've had in years, and the system worked. So now we see how NXT works. Thank you guys for listening. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort so